cheating millionaire husband asks his pregnant wife for money. Her fierce response shocks him. Lily's heart pounded as she clutched the ultrasound photo in her trembling hands. She had everything she'd ever hoped for: an exciting career, a beautiful home on the outskirts of Chicago, and a baby on the way with her charming millionaire husband, Jacob Barrington. Yet beneath the polished marble floors and gleaming chandeliers, secrets lurked in the shadows of their mansion. When Jacob's eyes started wandering and he set his sights on an enticing, reckless affair, Lily's world shattered. Little did he know the day would come when he, despite his immense wealth, would turn to her for money, only to face a scorching betrayal unlike anything he'd ever imagined. The day Lily first met Jacob Barrington felt like a scene pulled straight from a romantic film. She was a junior public relations associate, fresh out of grad school, hustling through an event for Louis Vuitton at the Grand Chicago Auditorium. Her job was to ensure that VIP guests felt welcome and that the brand's new collection presentation went smoothly. She was young, optimistic, and carried a determination that radiated from her eyes. If she got nervous, she never showed it. Her posture, her composure, and her quiet confidence conveyed the sense of a woman ready to conquer any challenge placed in front of her. Jacob was there as a high-profile guest, a self-made millionaire known for his tech innovations and flamboyant lifestyle. He exuded a charm that put everyone around him at ease. He wasn't your typical socially awkward tech genius. Instead, he had the suave presence of a well-seasoned actor and the undeniable magnetism of a man who knew what he wanted. From the moment he stepped out of his sleek black limousine, paparazzi cameras flashed like strobes, capturing every angle of his impeccably tailored suit and gracious smile. Rumors floated in the event space. "That's Jacob Barrington," one woman whispered. "His company just landed a multi-million-dollar deal with a Silicon Valley giant." Lily heard these whispers but kept her head in her work. She greeted him politely, offered him a flute of champagne, and then proceeded to check in on other VIP guests. Just as she turned around to leave, Jacob gently tapped her shoulder. "Don't I get a little more time with the woman who's running this show?" he asked, giving her a grin that made her heart skip a beat. Lily smiled politely. Her mind raced. Had she neglected him in some way, or was he just being flirtatious? She tried to maintain professional composure. "I'm so sorry. If you need anything," she said, "I can certainly assist you." "How can I help?" Jacob laughed. "Help? You already have. Just by being here," he said, eyes shimmering. She couldn't help but feel her cheeks flush. People around them noticed Jacob's interest, but Lily, trying to keep it professional, thanked him and moved along. Little did she know that brief introduction would spark a romance that would change her life forever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of courtship. Jacob invited Lily to exclusive galas, candlelit dinners at the finest restaurants in the city, and even flew her to New York for an extravagant weekend. He showered her with tokens of affection, diamond bracelets, roses that filled entire rooms, and sweet handwritten notes declaring his admiration. Lily found herself swept away, but she also kept her feet on the ground. She valued simple joys like walking by the lakeside, sharing heartfelt conversations under star-speckled skies, and listening to Jacob talk about his dreams for the future. Those intimate moments painted him as more than just a multi-millionaire. He was a passionate visionary with a heart of gold, or so she believed. After a brief 6-month romance, Jacob proposed to Lily in front of the iconic Buckingham Fountain in Chicago, friends and family secretly watching from a distance. They celebrated the engagement with champagne and tears of joy. For Lily, it felt like she had reached the peak of a mountain, gazing out at a vast horizon of promise and hope. She didn't know that, beneath the promise, cracks in Jacob's foundation were forming. When they wed, Jacob moved Lily into his sprawling estate near Lake Michigan. The house was an architectural masterpiece: marble floors, handcrafted pillars, and an elegant glass walkway leading from the main foyer to a lavish garden. A team of staff attended to every detail, from landscaping the grounds to polishing the silverware. Everywhere Lily looked, she saw a reflection of the man she thought Jacob was: refined, meticulous, and generous. But as the months rolled by, hints of Jacob's pride and arrogance began to show. He demanded the best of everything: the best furniture, the best vehicles, the best wines. Initially, Lily thought he was simply accustomed to a life of luxury. After all, his businesses thrived. He could afford these indulgences. But there were small signs that he was spending far beyond what even his large fortune could comfortably handle. She noticed credit card statements strewn on his office table with astronomically high charges at five-star resorts, high-end jewelry stores, and, oddly, private bars with questionable reputations. Whenever Lily tried to bring up the subject of finances, Jacob dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "I know what I'm doing, Lily. Don't worry about it," he'd say, with a reassuring smile. "Besides, you know how to handle your own job. Let me handle mine." Lily decided to trust him. After all, he had built a tech empire from scratch. She had never been a materialistic woman and had little interest in managing or even following the labyrinth of business dealings that Jacob did. She assumed that beneath his arrogance lay knowledge and the ability to manage risk. Their married life continued, with Lily occasionally glimpsing that side of Jacob that made her wary. But as soon as fear crept into her heart, he'd turn back into the romantic suitor she'd fallen in love with, taking her out to dinner and dancing with her in the courtyard under the moonlight. Love, in her eyes, was about seeing the best in someone. She remained convinced that Jacob's flamboyance stemmed from his desire to give her the world. 18 months into their marriage, Lily discovered she was pregnant. When she saw those 2 lines on the home test kit, her heart raced with a blend of excitement and trepidation. She scrambled to wrap the test in a small gift box, tying a pink ribbon around it. She practiced in the mirror how she would announce it to Jacob. She imagined tears of joy in his eyes, a tender embrace, maybe a vow that they would raise this child in a loving home filled with warmth and devotion. That evening, she presented Jacob with the gift, expecting an over-the-top reaction. He opened the box, stared at the test in confusion for a moment, then grinned. "Are we?" he murmured. Lily nodded, smiling wide. "Yes, we're having a baby." He laughed loudly, scooped her into his arms, and spun her around in the expansive living room. For a while, it felt like she was floating on air, as if all the doubts that had sometimes gnawed at her had vanished in the glow of impending parenthood. That night, they toasted the news with sparkling apple cider, clinking glasses under the chandelier. Jacob seemed genuinely excited, peppering Lily with questions about nursery designs, baby names, and future plans. But the days that followed introduced a subtle shift. Jacob became increasingly absent, citing urgent business calls at odd hours. He traveled more, flew to unexpected destinations, and left Lily behind, alone in that massive house. At first, Lily assumed the baby news had propelled him to work harder to ensure a stable future. She rationalized that he was trying to secure their child's life. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that something was off. During his absences, Lily attended prenatal appointments alone. Each time, the ultrasound technician pointed out the heartbeat or asked if she wanted to know the baby's gender. Lily was hit with a profound loneliness. She would smile politely, telling the doctor that her husband was occupied with work, but he'd be around eventually. Jacob missed multiple milestones. First time, Lily felt the baby move, the gender reveal. Whenever she confronted him, he apologized half-heartedly, always promising he'd make it up to her. As Lily's pregnancy advanced, the sense of foreboding that something was amiss grew. She started noticing unfamiliar perfume clinging to Jacob's clothes, suspicious receipts tucked in his wallet for lavish dinners in cities where he'd supposedly traveled for business. She found smudges of lipstick on his collar, pink or sometimes a bright red that wasn't hers. One day, a friend of hers called, sobbing into the phone. She had seen Jacob at a posh restaurant, not just having dinner with a woman, but cradling her hand across the table, leaning in intimately. Lily's friend hesitated to reveal this, not wanting to cause strife, but her loyalty to Lily outweighed her fear of confrontation. Lily pressed for every detail. The friend recalled the woman's long black hair, the diamond ring that sparkled on her finger, the stolen kisses she and Jacob shared in the corner booth. Lily's hand shook on the phone. Her entire body felt numb. That night, Lily waited for Jacob in the living room. She'd put on a calm facade, but her heart hammered in her chest. When he breezed in, smiling as if everything were normal, Lily wasted no time. "Where have you been?" she asked. "And don't say it was business." Jacob's eyes flickered momentarily. He sighed, pulling off his tie. "I've been working, Lily. I'm tired. We can talk tomorrow." "No, we talk now," she stated firmly. "I know about the dinners, about the lipstick. Who is she?" Jacob tried to dodge the question, but Lily pressed on. Eventually he snapped, "It's nothing, Lily. Just a client. A fling. It means nothing. I needed stress relief. I'm still here, aren't I? I'm still supporting us, our family." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. She felt the baby kick, as if responding to the tension flooding the air. She stormed to the guest bedroom, slamming the door behind her, ignoring his pleas to be reasonable and don't blow this out of proportion. As Lily lay on the bed, hands on her belly, she knew something had irreparably changed. In the following weeks, Lily tried to mend her marriage. She was carrying their child, and she believed in the sanctity of marriage. Therapy sessions were booked but often missed by Jacob. He was rarely home, claiming urgent meetings in Los Angeles or Miami. Lily started hearing rumors, dinners in the Hamptons, late-night parties, massive expenditures on a new sports car. She discovered that the client, whose name was Regina, was far more than just a casual fling. Regina was a rising influencer with a taste for luxury and scandal. She paraded around town in the diamond jewelry Jacob bought, documenting her escapades on social media. Some posts even featured glimpses of Jacob's silhouettes or the interior of the private jets he rented. Confronting Jacob again led nowhere. He apologized at first, but soon his frustration turned to anger. "I bring everything to this household," he spat one night, eyes filled with venom. "I made you who you are. Don't you lecture me about my life." The words stung, but Lily refused to cry in front of him. Time passed, and Lily buried herself in preparing for the baby's arrival. She filled an entire room with pastel wallpaper, plush teddy bears, atop of the lined crib. Jacob's presence was minimal, and when he was around, a tension hung in the air so thick you could slice it with a knife. Lily walked on eggshells, trying not to spark another fight. Her nights were sleepless as she felt more alone than ever. She wondered, should she leave? Should she stay for the baby? Jacob's empire began to show cracks. His lavish spending combined with questionable business dealings stretched his resources thin. One of his biggest contracts fell through, citing concerns about Jacob's reliability and the scandal swirling around his personal life. Investors started pulling out. Rumors churned in the media. Is the Barrington empire collapsing? Read one headline. Photos of Jacob partying with Regina circulated online, fueling speculation that his personal entanglements interfered with his work. Jacob responded to the looming financial crisis in typical Jacob fashion. Denial. He insisted everything was fine, pumping massive amounts of money into showy product launches to prove the naysayers wrong. He attempted to buy a prime piece of real estate in downtown Chicago, boasting of building a new headquarters that would outdo Silicon Valley's modern complexes. Banks became hesitant to offer loans, given the swirl of negative press. Jacob had gone from being the man with the golden touch to a cautionary tale. At home, the shift in Jacob's temperament was evident. He paced the halls, phone glued to his ear, voice raised in frustration. Staff members resigned, claiming unpaid salaries. Lily often found them outside her room, apologizing through tears, explaining they couldn't afford to keep working without pay. She tried to reason with Jacob, who brushed her off again. "It's temporary," he claimed. "I'll fix this. I always do," but the expression on his face betrayed a deep-rooted panic. As Lily's belly swelled, she tried to keep calm. She reached out to her parents and close friends, revealing only small pieces of what was going on. She didn't want pity, but neither could she handle the weight of her troubles alone. Her mother, gentle yet shrewd, hinted that Lily should consider her options carefully. But Lily felt trapped. She was financially dependent on Jacob. She'd left her full-time job shortly after their wedding, at Jacob's urging, and her savings were modest compared to his. She had a baby on the way and no stable income. Escape seemed daunting. 8 months into her pregnancy, Lily faced the unthinkable. She was sprawled on the living room couch, exhaustion evident in her every breath, when Jacob strutted in. He smelled of cigars and whiskey, the after-hours stench of a man desperate for deals. His eyes darted around, as if searching for answers in the lavish furniture and artworks that once symbolized success. Finally, he settled next to Lily. "I need a favor," he began softly, voice laced with a tinge of desperation. Lily barely recognized the vulnerability in his tone. "What is it?" she asked, her mind racing with the possibilities. Did he want her to talk to an investor on his behalf? Did he want moral support? He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze fixed on the Persian rug. "I need money," he muttered. "Why, we're a bit strapped, and some accounts are frozen. I just need a little injection of funds to tide me over." The words hung in the air, deafening in their simplicity. Lily blinked, convinced she must have misheard. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "Money? From me?" Jacob exhaled in frustration, as though her confusion was an inconvenience to him. "Yes, from you. Don't you have savings? A retirement fund or something? I need immediate cash flow to keep the business afloat." "It won't be for long. I can pay you back." Lily felt fury bubbling in her chest. She was heavily pregnant, emotionally drained, and now confronted by the very man who had betrayed her, asking for money. "Why would I give you money, Jacob?" she asked, biting back tears. "You've been cheating on me, ignoring me, neglecting our unborn child. And now you want to bail out?" Jacob's eyes flashed. "I said I'd pay you back. Don't act like some victim. We're married. If I lose everything, you and the baby lose everything too." Lily's stomach churned. The audacity of his request was staggering, but she also recognized the underlying manipulation. If he went bankrupt, she'd be left with nothing. She took a breath, forced herself to remain calm. "How much do you need?" Jacob mentioned a sum that made her stomach flip. It was more than she had saved in her entire life. In fact, it was close to every penny of the modest inheritance she'd received from her late grandmother, plus her personal emergency savings. His gaze hardened. "We have to do something. Otherwise, this house, our lifestyle gone." A tear slipped down Lily's cheek, but she wiped it away fiercely. She thought about the times she'd gone without new clothes, or fancy nights out, because she felt content with what she had. She thought about the nights she'd waited for Jacob, only to receive empty promises. And now, in her most vulnerable state, he expected her to hand over everything she had. "I'll think about it," she finally replied, her voice low, "but don't hold your breath." That night, Lily remained awake, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom, one of the only rooms she still felt comfortable in. Every memory of her marriage replayed like a film reel in her mind, their first spark of love, the sweet gifts, the proposals, the heartbreak, the deception. Through it all, she had tried to remain a loyal wife. Now, she wondered if her loyalty was the very thing keeping her tied to misery. By morning, her mind was made up. She found Jacob in his office, rummaging through piles of papers, bills, threats of lawsuits from vendors, legal documents. He looked up with an air of impatience. "Did you bring the check?" he asked, as though that was the only thing on his mind. Lily stood tall, even as her heavy belly tugged on her back. "I'm not giving you a dime," she declared, her tone steady yet fierce. Jacob's eyes widened. He scoffed. "You're joking. I'm very serious. You can't buy me. You can't guilt me into saving you from your own mistakes. You put us in this situation. You neglected me. You cheated. You used our money like it grew on trees. Now you want me to fix it all so you can keep living this lavish fantasy? No." His voice rose to a shout. "You ungrateful. Do you think you'll be better off if I go under? You'll lose this house, everything, Lily." She fired back, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Everything? What everything? You think I'm attached to marble floors and sports cars? My child doesn't need them to be happy. I'd rather be poor and free than be chained to a man who doesn't respect me." Jacob slammed his fist on the desk, launching scattered bills into the air, his face reddened with rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Don't come crying to me when you have nothing." Tears threatened to well up in Lily's eyes again, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. She turned on her heel and left, heart pounding with a mix of terror and liberation. She had taken a stand, something she never imagined she'd have the courage to do. Days turned into a chaotic blur. The staff who remained walked on pins and needles. Lawyers and accountants shuffled in and out of the mansion, carrying grim expressions and heavy briefcases. Lily became a ghost in her own home. She kept mostly to her room, venturing out only to take walks through the garden or to see her obstetrician. The baby was due in less than a month, and the physical and emotional toll weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, Jacob's downfall accelerated. His scandalous affair with Regina became public knowledge when paparazzi snapped explicit photographs of them at a high-end resort. The photos splashed across tabloids, accompanied by sensational headlines questioning Jacob's morality, his business acumen, and the precarious state of his finances. Major partners cut ties to avoid the PR nightmare. Share prices in Jacob's company nosedived, culminating in an emergency board meeting that unceremoniously removed him as CEO. He was left with a minority stake in a company he once ruled with an iron fist. Desperate and enraged, Jacob attempted to sell off assets to recoup funds. The mansion went on the market, but the negative press and the plunging real estate market forced the price to slump. Buyers offered sums far below its estimated worth. He liquidated expensive cars, art pieces, jewelry, anything to stave off the avalanche of debt. Regina, who had reveled in Jacob's wealth, distanced herself the moment she sensed trouble. She disappeared from social media in connection to him, quietly moving on to another wealthy opportunity. Jacob discovered he had burned nearly every bridge. Former friends who once flocked to his extravagant parties turned their backs, too afraid to be associated with a sinking ship. He was alone, humiliated, and cornered. Only then did he realize how deeply he had wronged Lily, and that her refusal to give him money was the only real reason he still had a shred of dignity left. Lily's due date arrived like a calm in the eye of the storm. Despite the chaos swirling around her, she found solace in preparing for the baby's arrival. She'd packed a hospital bag with the essentials, watched a multitude of prenatal classes online, and maintained her composure with the help of a few dear friends. and her mother, who had flown in from out of state to be by her side. Early one morning, Lily felt the first contractions. Sharp pangs radiated through her abdomen, taking her breath away. She called out to whoever was left in the house. No one answered at first. Jacob was locked in his office, presumably on a desperate phone call. Summoning the last vestiges of her strength, Lily made her way to the office and forced the door open. Jacob glanced at her, phone still pressed to his ear. He saw the sweat on her forehead, the fear in her eyes, and instantly understood. "I have to call you back," he muttered into the receiver before dropping the phone on the desk. Rushing to Lily's side, he asked if she could walk, if she needed anything. He guided her to the car and sped to the hospital. What followed were excruciating hours of labor. Lily clutched the hospital bed rails, sweat pouring down her face. Yet amid the agony, she found strength in the knowledge that she was about to meet her child. When the baby boy finally arrived, wailing in indignation at this harsh new world, Lily sobbed with relief. She felt an indescribable rush of love. The nurse placed the baby in her arms, and Lily whispered sweet nothings to him, tears and sweat mixing on her exhausted face. Jacob stood by the bedside, tears pooling in his eyes. In that moment, a flash of his old self-caring, gentle surfaced. He placed a trembling hand on the baby's tiny head and gazed at Lily with genuine warmth for the first time in months. But Lily, though moved by the magnitude of the birth, kept her guard up. She could not forget what he had done. For the first few days, Lily remained in the hospital, recovering. Jacob visited sporadically, sometimes holding the baby and mumbling apologies under his breath. Lily said little. She needed her energy for healing, and she had no interest in rehashing old arguments. Her mother, in the meantime, made discreet arrangements for Lily's future, searching for an affordable apartment in Chicago where Lily and the baby could move once she was discharged. As the hospital stay neared its end, Jacob approached Lily's bedside with an envelope in hand. His eyes were sunken, his once proud posture slumped. "I want to help," he murmured. "I know I've been a terrible husband, a fool, but I'm still this baby's father." Lily stared at him warily. She wondered if this was another trick or a shallow attempt at reconciliation. "What's in the envelope?" "An account," he replied softly. "With some money I managed to salvage from the estate after paying off the most pressing debts. It's not a fortune anymore, but it's something. You and the baby deserve at least that." She hesitated, memories of his betrayal flashing through her mind. But looking at her newborn, his tiny hands waving in the air, she realized that financial stability was necessary, at least for the child's immediate future. She took the envelope, saying nothing. Jacob swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Lily. Truly, I know I've lost your trust. I don't deserve forgiveness. But maybe I can be a better father." Lily's eyes moistened. She cradled the baby in her arms, uncertain of what the future held. "We'll see," she said simply, refusing to offer him false reassurance. A part of her believed that people could change, but she wasn't naive enough to ignore the damage he had done. 1 week later, Lily and the baby moved into a small but cozy apartment in the city. Her mother helped decorate the nursery corner, painting the walls a soothing shade of pale yellow. Sunlight streamed through the windows in the afternoons, offering a sense of warmth absent from the cold mansion that had once been her home. Jacob tried to stay involved. He showed up with baby supplies, apologized repeatedly, and attempted to bond with his newborn son, whom Lily had named Daniel. Yet Lily was firm. She refused to return to the mansion, which Jacob was still desperately trying to sell. She allowed him to visit under strict conditions and made it clear that she would no longer tolerate any form of manipulation or disrespect. In moments of introspection, Jacob realized how much he'd destroyed for the sake of image and pleasure. He had lost his position, his grand house was on the market, and the woman he once declared he'd cherish forever was done with him. For the first time in his life, he grasped the importance of humility. He found a modest condo for himself, started therapy, and embarked on a smaller-scale business consulting job. It was a steep fall from being a high-flying tech mogul to hustling for freelance gigs, but it was all he had left. And it might, just might, give him the chance to rebuild himself from the ashes if he truly decided to learn from his mistakes. During the months that followed, Jacob's world continued to spiral. Multiple lawsuits from creditors, pending tax audits from suspicious authorities, and the final blow, a scandal involving Regina's new lover who accused Jacob of setting them up for blackmail. The revelations, posted on social media, painted Jacob as vengeful and manipulative. The negative publicity irreparably stained his reputation. Investors blacklisted him, ensuring he wouldn't easily find big financial backing in the foreseeable future. Adding insult to injury, Regina leaked private messages to the tabloids, showcasing Jacob's desperate pleas for her to give him one more chance, even while Lily was pregnant. Those texts shattered any sympathy the public might have had left for him. Instead, they garnered widespread condemnation, turning him into a pariah in the same social circles he once dominated. Jacob's phone went silent, no invites, no parties, no job offers from old acquaintances. Meanwhile, Lily kept busy with little Daniel. Her mother supported her, and her best friend found Lily a part-time role, handling PR for a local non-profit. Slowly but surely, Lily found her footing. Her days were long but fulfilling, centered on caring for her infant son and reclaiming the independence she had once surrendered to Jacob's promises of luxury. The hush that fell over the apartment at night was a stark contrast to the mansion's endless halls and staff. But Lily found solace in the silence, a space to breathe and reflect. She realized she no longer had to wait for a husband who never came home. She felt the weight of heartbreak lift from her shoulders, replaced by determination. 6 months after Daniel's birth, Lily watched her baby attempt his first clumsy crawls. Each inch forward was a tiny victory. She recorded the moment on her phone, narrating it in a gentle voice. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. She recalled how, not so long ago, she had envisioned raising her child in a gleaming mansion, showered with wealth and comfort. Yet in this modest apartment, surrounded by baby toys and second-hand furniture, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she hadn't known in that marble palace. That same week, Lily had an unexpected visitor, Jacob. He stood outside her door, carrying a baby gift, an expensive rattle from a brand that specialized in silver baby accessories. She raised an eyebrow, debating whether to let him in. A glance at Daniel, giggling on the living room floor, prompted her to open the door. The tension between them was palpable. Jacob's eyes flickered around the apartment, taking in the humble decor. He set the gift on a small side table and cleared his throat. "I wanted to see Daniel," he said softly. Lily nodded, stepping aside. Jacob knelt, letting Daniel grab his fingers. A faint smile softened Jacob's face as the baby cooed. The moment was bittersweet. Lily stood back, arms folded, wondering how to navigate the delicate line between letting Jacob be a father and protecting herself from more heartache. When Jacob rose, Lily fixed him with a penetrating stare. "What do you really want, Jacob?" He swallowed. "To see my son, to try to make amends, if that's even possible. I'm not asking for us to get back together, unless—" "No," Lily interrupted, her tone firm. "We're not going backward." A painful silence ensued. Jacob nodded slowly. "I understand. I know I deserve this." He paused, struggling for words. "I lost everything, Lily, everything. It's like karma, I guess. I just want you to know I'm truly sorry." Her expression remained guarded, but she could see genuine remorse in his eyes. "Jacob, I appreciate that you're trying to own up to what you did, but I'm still healing. Let's keep this simple. You want to be part of Daniel's life? Fine, we'll have terms, legal ones maybe, but I can't go back to who we were. That person, that version of us, it's gone. Jacob blinked away tears. I understand. He lowered his gaze. I'll do whatever it takes. Over the following months, Jacob visited once or twice a week, carefully respecting Lily's boundaries. Their interactions were civil, sometimes even amicable, for Daniel's sake. Meanwhile, Lily steadily climbed the ladder at the non-profit, impressing her bosses with her PR savvy and dedication. Soon, she was offered a full-time role, with benefits a major relief for a single mother just finding her independence. With some newly earned savings, Lily upgraded the apartment bit by bit, buying a comfortable couch, cheerful artwork, and an array of toys for Daniel. She reconnected with old friends, some of whom she had lost touch with during her whirlwind marriage. They welcomed her back with open arms, supporting her emotionally and practically. Jacob's finances remained dire, and the mansion eventually sold for far less than its market value. Lawsuits drained whatever money he had left, leaving him with a modest bank account. He contemplated filing for bankruptcy, but a short gig in consulting prevented him from hitting rock bottom financially. Emotionally, however, he was already there. And if there was ever a silver lining, it was that hitting rock bottom forced him to re-evaluate his priorities. He enrolled in a 12-step program for addiction to the high life, to attention, to fleeting pleasures. Therapy sessions began to chip away at the man who had hidden behind arrogance and indulgence. Another year passed, and Daniel turned one. Lily threw a small party in the apartment's community hall. Balloons bobbed in the air, a birthday banner stretched across the wall, and a homemade cake with vanilla frosting sat on the table. Friends and family arrived, showering Daniel with laughter, gifts, and love. Jacob showed up too, quietly slipping into the room with a small stuffed bear for his son. Lily allowed him to join the festivities, though she remained slightly distant. In a moment when they were alone, Jacob placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Thank you for letting me be here," he said. "I know it isn't easy for you." She studied him. He looked different, older, with slight bags under his eyes and a humility that she had never seen before. "I'll always let you be here for Daniel," she said quietly. "I don't want him to grow up without a father. But that's up to you, Jacob. You have to keep working on yourself." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I will, I promise." They rejoined the group, where Lily's mother was helping Daniel blow out the single candle. Daniel giggled as everyone clapped and cheered. The sound filled the small hall, reverberating against Lily's heart. This was her life now, simpler, not without challenges, but real and grounded. No illusions, no deceptions, just honest connections. Later that night, after all the guests had left and Daniel was asleep, Lily sat in the apartment surrounded by wrapping paper and leftover cake. She thought back to the moment when Jacob had demanded money, the rage and betrayal she'd felt. The memory still stung, but it no longer consumed her. In a way, Jacob had forced her to discover her own strength. She had refused to sacrifice her dignity, and in doing so, she had found herself. Time continued its steady march. Daniel became a bright, curious toddler. Lily rose through the ranks at her organization, eventually landing a managerial role. Her salary was comfortable, and she ensured that Daniel had all he needed: a good preschool, healthy meals, and lots of books and toys. Every so often, Lily caught herself reminiscing about the mansion, the swirling staircase, the glittering parties, realizing that wealth couldn't buy the peace she'd now found. She was far from rich, but she was secure in her ability to provide a stable home for her son. Jacob, meanwhile, managed to settle most of his debts through a slow, grinding process. He rented a modest apartment across town, focusing on self-improvement and building a more honest life. The tabloids no longer chased him, having moved on to the next scandal. He took each day as it came, slowly regaining his footing in the business world. one small project at a time, and every Sunday he showed up at Lily's door with a box of diapers or some baby items. They'd converse about Daniel's latest antics, how he loved watching cartoons or trying to feed himself with a spoon. Sometimes Jacob accompanied them to the park, chasing after Daniel as he learned to run. The arrangement was tenuous but functional. Lily made sure to keep emotional boundaries firmly in place. Jacob appeared grateful for any crumbs of trust she offered. 3 years after Daniel's birth, Lily received a call from a journalist wanting to interview her. The man explained that he was writing a piece on the meteoric rise and fall of Jacob Barrington. "You were his wife during his heyday," the journalist said, "and you left him at the peak of his downfall. I'd love your perspective." Lily hesitated, uncertain if she wanted to reopen old wounds. She politely declined. The journalist, however, was persistent, even offering a sum for her story. Lily hung up, repulsed by the idea of profiting from a painful chapter in her life. But the call unsettled her. It reminded her just how public and humiliating her ordeal had been. That evening, Jacob called, his voice strained. He'd received word that tabloids were rummaging through the ashes again. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I never meant for my mess to follow you around." Lily sighed. "It's done. I can't change the past. We just have to handle it with dignity." Jacob offered a small, sad laugh. "I wish I'd learned that lesson sooner." With the tabloids stirring up dust, Lily feared that the uneasy peace they had found might be threatened. But surprisingly, the media frenzy lasted only a few weeks before dissipating. Newer, juicier scandals replaced Jacob's old story. In the quiet aftermath, Lily found that she felt free, as if she no longer needed to guard the fortress of her heart quite so ferociously against ghosts of the past. One sunny afternoon, Jacob invited Lily and Daniel to a small barbecue at his new place. Lily, after some thought, agreed. She packed a bag of snacks and Daniel's favorite toys. Pulling up to the modest house, far from the grandeur of the mansion, she felt a strange sense of relief. No security gates, no prying paparazzi, just a normal front yard with a grill and a few fold-out chairs. Jacob greeted them with a smile, showing Daniel a little inflatable pool in the backyard. The boy squealed with excitement. Lily sat on a lawn chair, carefully observing Jacob. He seemed lighter, more at peace. He grilled burgers and hot dogs, occasionally pausing to make sure Daniel didn't wander too far. The afternoon passed in quiet, domestic bliss. Jacob cleared his throat, turning to Lily. "Thank you for coming. You didn't have to, I know, but thank you." Lily nodded, sipping lemonade. "It's good for Daniel to see us together, in a healthy environment," she said. She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I'm proud of you, Jacob. You've changed a lot." Jacob's eyes glimmered with gratitude. "I'm trying every day. The life I used to live. It was toxic. I see that now." They chatted about Daniel's upcoming preschool enrollment and Lily's job. For the first time in a long while, they conversed without the tension of unspoken anger or hurt. When the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily gathered Daniel's toys. Jacob walked them to the car. Before she got in, he held out his hand. "I know things can't go back to the way they were," he said quietly, "but I hope we can keep moving forward, whatever that looks like." Lily studied his face for a moment. The flickering street lamp above them revealed a sincerity she hadn't seen in years. "We can," she said, and offered a small smile, "for Daniel's sake and for ours, in our own way." In the days, weeks, and eventually the years that followed, Lily and Jacob discovered the delicate balancing act of living separate lives while still weaving moments of unity for Daniel's sake. Their cooperative relationship as co-parents didn't form overnight. It was a slow, sometimes painful process that demanded patience and boundaries from both sides. At first, they kept communication strictly to essential updates, medical checkups, School visits, childcare routines, but gradually, some of the unspoken tension lessened. They learned to speak civilly and even share a cautious smile over Daniel's quirky toddler habits. Yet they remained legally separated, a status that gave each of them the space to heal. Lily, once consumed by bitterness and betrayal, found that time and distance allowed her to see Jacob's transformation more objectively. She was under no illusion that the old wounds could ever fully vanish, but she noticed that adversity had forced Jacob to confront his demons. He no longer reveled in extravagant spending or boasted about his prowess. Instead, a kind of sober humility took hold of him. In the remnants of his fall from grace, he seemed more grateful for the small things like hearing Daniel laugh or sharing a cup of coffee with Lily while waiting for the pediatrician. After liquidating the last of his once vast assets to cover legal fees and settle lingering debts, Jacob stepped away from the tech scene that had both fueled and destroyed him. He took a consulting job with a modest salary, advising young entrepreneurs on how to avoid the pitfalls of greed, reckless ambition, and unchecked spending. It was an ironic turn of events for a man once hailed as a business prodigy. Still, Jacob found that embracing truth over facade brought unexpected relief. He received messages from startup founders who thanked him not just for his expertise, but for sharing the cautionary tale of his own downfall. In a twist he never anticipated, his failure made him more relatable and ultimately more valuable to those seeking genuine guidance. With a steadier income, Jacob moved into a small townhouse just across town from Lily's apartment. It had no marble foyers or sweeping lake views, but it had enough space for Daniel's visits, including a second bedroom Lily insisted Daniel should have whenever he stayed overnight with his father. Jacob decorated it with simple furniture, bright posters of cartoon characters Daniel loved, and a toy chest filled with building blocks, puzzles, and stuffed animals. Each time Daniel came over, Jacob's eyes lit up as he tried his best to create joyful memories, perhaps making up for the times he had chosen lavish parties and affairs over family. Meanwhile, Lily continued to carve out her own path, juggling full-time work at the non-profit where she swiftly rose into a supervisory position alongside motherhood was no small feat. She attended weekend conferences and evening strategy sessions, leveraging her PR background to secure new sponsors and grants that furthered the organization's mission. Her dedication and leadership qualities didn't go unnoticed, and she soon became a face of the non-profit, interviewed in local papers and small TV segments where she spoke passionately about community outreach. Despite the demands of her job, Lily never lost sight of the most important part of her life, Daniel. She coordinated her schedule so she could be there for his doctor appointments, his daycare pickups, his first attempts at riding a tricycle. He was a bright-eyed, curious child who approached the world with the same determined spirit she carried within herself. Their home was modest but full of warmth, finger paintings taped on the fridge, a small bookshelf overflowing with Dr. Seuss titles and picture books on animals. Each evening, as Lily tucked Daniel into bed, she felt a surge of gratitude for the independence she had reclaimed and the life she was building. The romantic chapter between Lily and Jacob had closed long ago, yet a different, cautiously respectful bond emerged. They texted each other about Daniel's progress in preschool, shared photos of him playing in the park, or laughed occasionally about a funny thing he said. Though Lily remained guarded, she found her old anger softening when Jacob demonstrated genuine responsibility, like stepping in to babysit when she had an important event, or sending money when Daniel needed new clothes. Occasionally, he brought groceries over, offering to help cook dinner so he could spend an extra hour with their son. Lily allowed it, always drawing a clear line between co-parenting teamwork and any notion of rekindled intimacy. Jacob, for his part, dated sporadically, There were moments when Lily caught a glimpse of pangs in his eyes, perhaps regret or lingering affection, but he never pressed her to reconcile. His therapist, along with his newfound dedication to living a more honest life, kept him accountable. He spoke openly about how he feared losing Daniel's trust if he ever fell back into his old habits. If Lily's refusal to give him money had sparked his downfall, the love he felt for his son became the cornerstone of his redemption. Time has a way of revealing all possibilities. Lily eventually opened her heart to new relationships, meeting others who respected her independence and admired her strength. She dated a caring journalist for nearly 6 months, but their paths diverged when he accepted a job in another state. Later, she found a gentle, thoughtful architect who encouraged her career ambitions and expressed genuine affection for Daniel. While Lily refused to rush into anything, she learned that love could be built on a foundation of respect, companionship, and openness, quite different from the whirlwind romance she once experienced with Jacob. Even if things didn't work out with every suitor, Lily's sense of self remained grounded. Jacob observed Lily's progress with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. He realized the depth of what he had lost, but he also respected Lily's need to move forward on her own terms. And in those fleeting moments when he felt tempted to wallow in regret, he reminded himself that personal growth lay in accepting the consequences of his choices. Over time, Lily and Jacob's relationship settled into a rhythm that suited them both. They arranged routines for Daniel weekend visits at Jacob's place, alternating pickups from preschool, occasional outings as a group to the children's museum or the zoo. Daniel, in turn, thrived within this supportive framework, sensing the calm cooperation between his parents. The memory of Lily's pregnancy, overshadowed by Jacob's betrayal, remained etched in their past, but it no longer held the power to define their present. If anyone had asked Lily, years earlier, whether she would find peace and even contentment after the devastation caused by Jacob's infidelity, she might have laughed cynically. But the passage of time and Jacob's sincere effort to become a better father reshaped her perspective. She still acknowledged the gravity of his wrongdoing and made sure Daniel, once old enough to understand, knew an age-appropriate version of their history. Yet she also recognized that sometimes true deliverance comes only after enduring the hardest trials. Thus, they parted ways, no longer husband and wife, but something else that still held value, co-parents dedicated to raising a child in a healthier environment than either had once believed possible. Jacob would never regain the staggering fortune he'd once wielded, nor the blind adoration he had so craved. Lily would never forget how close she came to sacrificing her dignity for a doomed fairy tale. But in accepting these truths, both gained the freedom to chart new paths, ones built on cautious optimism, humility, and above all, unconditional love for the young boy who bound them together in a way no amount of money or betrayal could sever. Years later, Jacob wrote a blog post, one that went viral, titled "The Price of Arrogance." He recounted how he had risen to millionaire status, crashed spectacularly, and lost the love of his life due to hubris and infidelity. But in losing everything, he gained a chance at redemption, a lesson in humility, and a relationship with his son that mattered more than any fortune. Lily read the post with a strange mixture of sadness, pride, and relief. She saw in Jacob's words the man he might have been all along if only he had let himself be human. For Lily, the journey confirmed a vital truth. Love was more than grand gestures and diamond rings. It was respect, loyalty, and kindness, qualities that can't be bought. She found that her own soul had grown stronger through the ordeal, and she vowed never to give that power away again. Standing in her cozy living room, Lily watched Daniel, now an energetic child running around with an action figure in hand. She felt gratitude that she had chosen dignity over wealth, self-respect over surrender, and a genuine life instead of a fairy tale built on lies. Jacob's karma had come full circle, hitting him hard, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions. Yet, in the debris of his once lavish life, he had discovered something more precious than any gilded mansion or private jet: the chance to atone, to rebuild, and to be a father worthy of Daniel's adoration. And so, life moved on. Lily recorded these memories in a journal, keeping them safe for Daniel to read one day, should he want to know how his parents found the strength to break free from a toxic cycle. The unstoppable tide of time eventually smoothed over the sharp edges of heartbreak and betrayal, leaving behind lessons, new beginnings, and the unbreakable bond of family, even if that family looked different than Lily once dreamed. Lily's decision to stand firm changed her life forever. In refusing Jacob's manipulative demand for money, she uncovered a reservoir of inner strength that shaped her family's future in ways she never could have imagined. Although their marriage was beyond repair, Lily forged a new path, one founded on respect and independence, all while co-parenting Daniel with a healthier perspective. Meanwhile, Jacob confronted his own demons, realizing that wealth and grandeur could never replace genuine love or moral responsibility. Their story reminds us that sometimes the hardest decisions turn out to be the most liberating, and that true wealth comes from integrity and authentic relationships.
A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a walk-in closet overflowing with Hermes, and a baby on the way. Anya had it all, or so she thought. In the blink of an eye, her billionaire husband, a man who once promised her the world, stood before her, his words colder than the winter wind whipping across their panoramic window. "I want a divorce." But before the ink could dry on the papers, a knock on the door changed everything. His mistress wasn't there to gloat. She was there to expose a secret so dark it would make his demand for a divorce the least of Anya's worries. The scent of blooming peonies and old money filled the air of the penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of 432 Park Avenue. It was a sterile, curated scent, one that Anya had come to associate with her life, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of the earthy reality she secretly craved. From this height, New York City was a glittering, silent diorama. The yellow cabs were ants, the sprawling green of Central Park, a manicured carpet, and the people, the millions of bustling, striving souls, were entirely insignificant, just like her. Anya traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the stark minimalist decor Julian insisted upon. Everything was shades of grey chrome and glass. It was the home of a man who admired his reflections, both literal and financial. He called it uncluttered. Anya called it empty. Her hand drifted down to the gentle swell of her stomach, a 6-month bump that was her only true possession in this sky-high palace. This baby, her baby, was the one vibrant, chaotic, and real thing in her life. It was a secret garden she nurtured within herself, a world away from Julian's meticulous control. Julian Croft. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a visionary in the volatile world of tech mergers and acquisitions. His face, all sharp angles and disarming smiles, graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He had a Midas touch, turning fledgling startups into billion-dollar unicorns with a flick of his pen. He had swept Anya off her feet 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator, then full of opinions and passion, and he had seemed utterly captivated by her spirit. He'd courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that leave a woman breathless, a private viewing at the Met, a weekend trip to Paris, on a whim a rare first-edition book of poetry she'd once mentioned in passing. He had built a gilded cage for her, and she, dazzled by the shine, had walked right in. She'd given up her small gallery job, her cramped but cozy apartment in the village, and her circle of wonderfully messy artistic friends. Julian had said he wanted to give her the world. She hadn't realized he meant he wanted to become her entire world. The sound of the private elevator chiming its arrival pulled her from her reverie. Julian was home. Early. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a feeling that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. He strode into the living area, looking every inch the master of the universe. His bespoke Tom Ford suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his face held the neutral, unreadable expression he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view, as if calculating its net worth. Julian Anya began, her voice softer than she intended. "You're home. I was just about to have the chef start on dinner." He turned then, and the coldness in his eyes extinguished the small flicker of hope in her chest. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition for his pregnant wife. It was the look he gave a line item on a balance sheet that was underperforming. "Don't bother," he said, his voice flat and clipped. He walked over to the marble bar and poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the decanter against the glass, unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We need to talk, Anya." Anya's hand instinctively went back to her belly, a protective gesture. "Is everything all right? Did the deal with the Japanese consortium fall through?" She tried to grasp for a familiar topic, a corner of his life she was still permitted to understand. He took a long swallow of his drink, his throat bobbing. "The deal is fine. Everything in my life is perfectly aligned. Except this." He gestured vaguely between them, an all-encompassing wave that dismissed their 5 years of marriage. Their shared bed, the child growing inside her. This she whispered, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. This marriage, he stated, turning to face her fully. His face was a mask of detached finality. "It's run its course. It no longer serves its purpose. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly, like shards of glass from the panoramic window he so admired. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She must have misheard. This was Julian's idea of a joke, a cruel, power-playing jest to see her squirm. "A divorce," she stammered, a hysterical little laugh escaping her lips. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "I'm aware of the child's existence," he said, his voice laced with an icy patience that was more terrifying than any shout. "My lawyers have already been instructed to be generous. A trust will be established for the child. You will be provided with a settlement that will allow you to live very comfortably. A nice apartment, a staff, whatever you need. You will want for nothing materially." Materially. The word was an insult, a deliberate reduction of her life, her love, her very being to a transaction. The man who had once quoted poetry to her was now liquidating her like a bad asset. "I don't want a settlement, Julian. I want my husband. I want the father of my child." Her voice cracked, the carefully constructed composure of the perfect wife, shattering into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "What has happened to you? What has happened to us? Nothing has happened," he insisted, his calm unwavering. He was a stone wall, impervious to her pain. "This was always a contract, Anya. An arrangement. You provided beauty, social grace, a certain aesthetic. I provided a lifestyle beyond your wildest dreams. The contract is now being terminated. A contract. She stared at him aghast. The last 5 years replayed in her mind, now tainted and twisted by his cruel words. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise now felt like a lie, a performance. She felt a wave of nausea so profound it had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had been a fool, a beautiful, well-kept, blind fool. There's someone else, isn't there? The question was a classic, a cliché she never thought she'd utter. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not guilt, but a flicker of annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing around his head. That's irrelevant to the situation. Irrelevant? She cried, her voice rising. You're throwing me out pregnant with your child, and you tell me your mistress is irrelevant. Who is she, Julian? He walked over to the sleek obsidian desk in the corner and pulled a thick document from a leather briefcase. He tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. The sound was a final, definitive thud. These are the divorce papers, he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. My lawyers advise you to sign them without contest. A prolonged, messy battle will not be beneficial for you, or for the public's perception of you. I have a reputation to maintain. He was threatening her. He was threatening to paint her as a gold digger, a shrew, to drag her name through the mud, while he stood pristine on his mountain of money. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her, to control the very narrative of her existence, even as he expelled her from his. She looked from the papers to his cold, handsome face. The man she loved, or the man she thought she loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster, a creature of pure, unadulterated avarice and ego. A profound, chilling clarity washed over her. The shock receded, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. No, she said, her voice trembling, but firm. Julian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No. I will not sign these. I will not be discarded like one of your failed investments. This child, she said, her hand protectively cradling her belly, deserves a father. And I deserve an explanation. A real one. Julian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told no. The air crackled with his silent fury. He took a step towards her, his physical presence suddenly feeling overwhelming, threatening. You are making a grave mistake, Anya, he hissed. You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea the forces at play here. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It's the best option for everyone. His words held a hidden weight, a darker undercurrent that went beyond a simple sordid affair. The forces at play here. It wasn't the plea of a man in love with someone else. It was a warning, a threat. Before Anya could respond, before she could decipher the strange, panicked glint in his eyes, the chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse once more. Both their heads snapped towards the sound. Julian's face for the first time that evening lost its composure. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his features so quick that Anya almost missed it. He looked trapped. Who is that? Anya asked, her own confusion mounting. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian guarded their privacy with a zeal that bordered on paranoid. Don't. Julian breathed, his eyes wide, as he stared at the elevator doors. It wasn't a command to Anya, but a desperate plea to the universe. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair cut into a sharp, severe bob, and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, bloody slash of color in the monochrome world of Julian's penthouse. Anya's heart stopped. It had to be her. The mistress. She had come to gloat to witness the final destruction of the wife to claim her prize. Anya braced herself for the humiliation, the final crushing blow. But the woman's eyes weren't on Anya. They were locked on Julian, and they held no trace of triumph. Her beautiful face was pale. Her hands were trembling, and her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored the panic on Julian's face. She took a shaky step into the room. Julian, the woman, said, her voice a ragged whisper that cut through the silence. "It's over. They know. They know everything." Julian stared at her, his mask of control utterly shattered. He looked like a man staring at his own ghost. Anya looked back and forth between her husband and this beautiful, terrified stranger. A cold dread far deeper and more terrifying than the pain of betrayal began to creep up her spine. This wasn't about a simple affair. Julian's strange warning, his panic, this woman's fear, it was all connected to something far bigger. The divorce papers lay on the table, forgotten. The gilded cage had just burst open, but Anya had a sickening feeling that she hadn't been set free. She had just been tossed into the fire. The woman in the crimson dress took another hesitant step into the cavernous living room. Her designer heels, which should have clicked with authority on the polished marble floor, were instead unnervingly silent, as if she were trying to retract her own presence. Anya's mind, still reeling from the whiplash of the divorce demand, struggled to process this new bizarre tableau. The mistress, for who else could she be, wasn't acting like a victor. She was acting like a fugitive. "Isabel, what the hell are you doing here?" Julian finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. He shot a venomous glare at her, a look that was less about a spurned lover and more about a co-conspirator who had broken rank. He moved almost unconsciously to position himself between Isabel and Anya, a futile attempt to control the flow of information. "I tried to call you Isabel," said her voice, trembling. She ignored Anya completely, her gaze fixed on Julian's increasingly frantic expression. "Your phone was off. I left a dozen messages with your secretary. I had to come. We don't have any time." "Time for what?" Anya interjected, her voice finding a new steely edge. The initial shock was beginning to curdle into suspicion. "Time to coordinate your stories before you throw me out." Isabel's head snapped towards Anya, and for the first time she seemed to truly see her. There was no malice in her emerald eyes, no smug superiority. Instead, Anya saw a flicker of something that looked unnervingly like pity. It was an expression that infuriated Anya more than any taunt could have. "This has nothing to do with your marriage," Isabel said, with a dismissive wave of her hand that was so absolute it was chilling. "That's just collateral damage. A loose end he was trying to tie up." "A loose end," Anya repeated the words, tasting like ash. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. "Is that what I am to you, Julian? A loose end?" "Shut up!" Isabel Julian roared, finally losing the last vestige of his icy control. He lunged towards her, grabbing her arm. "You shouldn't be here. We had a plan. The plan is shot to hell." "Julian." Isabel wrenched her arm free, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of anger. The plan went up in smoke the moment my brother's name appeared on the SEC's inquiry list this morning. The acronym hung in the air, SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The federal agency that policed Wall Street, the boogeyman of every high-flying financier. It was a name Anya knew from the headlines from the periphery of Julian's world, but it had never felt real, never had any bearing on her curated life. Until now. What SEC inquiry Anya demanded, stepping forward. She was no longer just a passive victim in a domestic drama. She was an unwilling participant in something far more sinister. Julian. What is she talking about? She's talking nonsense. Julian spat, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist 82 floors in the sky. She's hysterical. Her brother made some bad investments, and now she's panicking and trying to drag me into it. He was trying to rebuild his wall of composure, but the cracks were showing. His hands were trembling, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out on his forehead. Bad investments. Isabel let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. Is that what you call it? You used him. Julian. You used my family's brokerage firm as a shield. You ran the entire scheme through their accounts. Made them look like the masterminds while you stayed clean. Scheme. The word was a poison dart. Anya's gaze swung back to Julian. His entire empire, his Midas touch, was it all just a trick? A lie, just like their marriage. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice low and threatening as he took a step towards Isabel. And I suggest you leave now before you say something you'll regret. No. Isabel stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was still there, but it was now bolstered by a desperate, cornered resolve. I'm not taking the fall for you. My brother is not going to prison for you. I loved you, Julian, or I thought I did, but I see what you are now. You don't love anyone. You consume them. You use them up, and then you discard the husk. Her eyes flickered to Anya. She knows. Don't you? Anya thought back. The last 6 months, Julian's increasing secrecy, his late nights at the office, which she had assumed were due to his affair, the strange hushed phone calls he would take in his study, ending them abruptly if she walked in, the way he had systematically isolated her, severing her ties to her old friends, even discouraging visits from her own family, claiming he wanted to protect her peace and privacy during her pregnancy. It hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about isolating a witness. What scheme, Julian Anya's voice was dangerously quiet. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, terrifying calm. What did you do? Anya, listen to me, Julian said, turning to her, his voice attempting a gentleness that now sounded grotesque and manipulative. She's a scorned woman. She's trying to ruin me because I ended our affair. It's the oldest story in the book. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. It's you I'm trying to protect. He was trying to play her to use their shared history and their unborn child as a shield. But the spell was broken. She could see the puppeteer's strings. Protect. She repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. By demanding a divorce an hour ago, by calling me a loose end, you needed to tie up. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to cut me loose before the ship sank, weren't you? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim a single cent of your precious dirty money when it all came crashing down. The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The divorce wasn't about his love for Isabel. It was a calculated financial maneuver. A preemptive strike in a war he knew was coming. He was willing to make his own pregnant wife a refugee from his life to save himself. "It's called a SPAC," Isabel said. Suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. She was no longer speaking just to Julian, but to Anya, to the room, to the universe. She was confessing. A special purpose acquisition company. It's the cleanest grift on Wall Street right now. Anya had heard Julian talk about SPACs. He'd called them blank check companies, a faster, more efficient way to take a private company, public bypassing the rigorous scrutiny of a traditional IPO. He had launched 3 of them in the last 2 years, raising billions from investors eager to get in on the ground floor of his next big thing. The media had lauded him as an innovator. Your husband, Isabel, continued, her voice gaining a morbid momentum, is a master at selling dreams. He would launch a SPAC, promising to merge it with a revolutionary tech company. The hype alone would send the stock soaring. Investors from massive hedge funds to ordinary people would pour their life savings into it all, based on his reputation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But there was no company, Anya. There was never any revolutionary tech. It was all smoke and mirrors. A shell game. Julian lunged for her again. "You're lying, am I?" Isabel sidestepped him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. "Tell her about Project Chimera, Julian. Tell her about the next-gen AI integration platform that was going to change the world. Show her the fancy prospectus, the one with the fabricated data and the photoshopped pictures of a non-existent office in Silicon Valley." She turned back to Anya, her voice dropping. "The money from the investors. It wasn't used for acquisitions. It was funneled, laundered through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, one of which was my brother's unwitting firm. Julian would skim off hundreds of millions, paying off early investors with money from new ones to keep the illusion going. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Anya just dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit. And the whole thing is about to collapse." Anya stared at Julian, waiting for him to deny it, to rage, to offer some plausible explanation. But he said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, the cornered animal, the master of the universe, brought low by a single, unraveling thread. The entire foundation of her life, the penthouse, the clothes, the art, the security was not just built on lies, but on theft, on the stolen dreams and life savings of countless unknown people. She felt a dizzying vertigo, the floor seeming to drop away beneath her. Her hand flew to her stomach, to the one pure thing in this world of deceit. This child, her son or daughter, was heir to a fortune that didn't exist, a legacy of shame. So the divorce. Anya trailed off, the full, monstrous picture becoming clear. The settlement you offered me, that generous trust for our little child. Where was that money coming from, Julian? He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the dark, terrifying truth. "It's the last of the clean money, isn't it?" she whispered in horror. "The money you had before all this started. You were trying to firewall it, to put it in my name and the baby's name so the SEC couldn't touch it when they came for the rest. You weren't giving me a gift. You were using your pregnant wife and your unborn child as a money mule." The silence that followed was a confession. It was the most damning sound Anya had ever heard. The man she had married was not just a cheat or a liar. He was a predator of the highest order, and he had just tried to make her his final accomplice. The doorbell chimed, not the private elevator this time, but the main service door to the apartment. A loud, insistent official buzzing. It was a sound none of them could ignore. Julian, Isabel, and Anya all froze, their three-person drama instantly rendered insignificant. This was no longer a private implosion. The outside world was knocking. Julian's eyes, wide with terror, met Anya's. The last shred of his bravado was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man whose time had run out. The buzzing came again, longer this time, more demanding. "Don't answer it," Julian whispered, a desperate, futile command. But Anya was already walking towards the door. The fog of her shock and betrayal was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had been a pawn in his game for far too long. The game was over. Her hand closed around the cold steel handle of the door. Whatever was on the other side, it was the beginning of her new reality. She had to face it, for herself and for the child she carried. She pulled the door open. Standing in the hallway were two men in dark, conservative suits. They were nondescript, their faces impassive, but they carried an aura of unshakable authority that made the air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse feel cheap and thin. One of them held up a badge and an official-looking document. Julian Croft, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and professional, but with an underlying steel that tolerated no argument. His eyes flicked past Anya to where Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises." The FBI. The letters seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. It was one thing to hear the acronym SEC from a panicked mistress. It was another to see the flesh and blood embodiment of a federal investigation standing on your doorstep. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He stared at the agents, his mouth slightly agape. The master manipulator suddenly a speechless puppet. Isabel let out a small, choked sob and sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive minimalist sofas, her crimson dress pooling around her like a stain. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the grim resignation of someone who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now simply waiting for the blast. Agent Miller and his partner stepped into the apartment, their sensible shoes making solid, real-world sounds on the marble floor. Anya stepped back, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She was watching a movie of her own life imploding. The agent's eyes swept the room, cataloguing the art, the furniture, the view, not with admiration, but with the cold appraisal of an asset seizure. "We also have a warrant for your arrest." "Mr. Croft." Agent Miller continued in the same dispassionate tone, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "For conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." The words were a death sentence, a formal indictment of everything Isabel had just revealed. The Ponzi scheme project, Chimera. The stolen money, it was all real. And now the consequences were real too. "This is a mistake," Julian finally stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. "My lawyers." "Your lawyers have been notified," Agent Miller cut him off smoothly. "They can meet you downtown. Please place your hands behind your back." The sight of Julian Croft, the titan of Wall Street, the man whose confident smirk had sold billions in fraudulent dreams, being handcuffed in his own living room, was surreal. The metallic click of the cuffs locking into place was the final definitive sound of his world ending. He didn't resist. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shock. As the second agent began to lead Julian towards the door, Isabel suddenly stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her voice filled with a new urgent terror. "Wait!" she cried out, her voice sharp. "That's not all. That's not the real reason." Agent Miller paused, turning to her with a look of mild professional interest. "The real reason for what, ma'am?" "For the divorce," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "For why he had to get her out. It's not just about the money. There's something else. Something worse." Anya, who had been standing silently by the wall, felt a new wave of ice-cold dread. Worse. What could possibly be worse than a billion-dollar fraud that had ruined countless lives? What was the dark secret that even a massive financial crime was meant to cover up? Julian's head snapped up. He shot a look at Isabel, a look of pure murderous rage mixed with desperate pleading. "Isabel, no. Don't. I have to," she sobbed. "They need to know everything. They need to know why you were so desperate." She turned to the agents, her words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The SPACs. The fraud. That was the end game. But it started somewhere else. It started with his first company. Gen-Tech Solutions." Anya vaguely remembered the name. It was the company Julian had founded before they met the one that had given him his initial millions and launched his reputation as a tech prodigy. He had sold it for a massive profit years ago. "What about it?" Agent Miller asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Gen-Tech's flagship product was a proprietary data encryption software, Isabel explained, her voice gaining clarity as she forced the story out. It was sold to dozens of high-level corporate clients, banks, law firms, private equity funds. They promised impenetrable security. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Anya's. The pity was back in her gaze, but now it was deeper, darker, filled with a horror that Anya couldn't yet comprehend. But it wasn't an encryption software, Anya. It was a key. Julian built a back door into the system, a master key that gave him access to everything. For years he had a live feed into the most sensitive corporate data in the country. Mergers and acquisitions plans, confidential legal strategies, insider trading information. The scale of it was dizzying. Julian hadn't just been a con artist. He had been a digital phantom, a ghost in the machine systematically stealing the lifeblood of the corporate world. That's how he made his first fortune. Isabel continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't genius. It was theft on an industrial scale. He knew which companies were going to be acquired before they did. He knew which stocks would soar and which would plummet. He wasn't predicting the market. He was reading the script. The agents exchanged a look. This was new information. This went beyond the SPACs. This was the origin story of his entire criminal enterprise. But that's still not the secret. Isabel choked out, tears streaming down her face again. That's just more fraud. Then what is it? Anya finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo in the room. She had to know. She had to know the final, terrible truth that was poisoning the very air she breathed. Isabel's gaze was fixed on Anya's pregnant belly. 2 years ago, one of the companies he was spying on, a pharmaceutical firm called Biovance, they were on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new gene therapy treatment. But they had a problem. Their final human trials were showing some irregularities, dangerous side effects that they were trying to solve before announcing the drug. Julian was now shaking his head violently. his muffled pleas ignored by the agent holding him. "Don't say it, Isabel. Please." Julian knew the drug was flawed. Isabel forged on her voice, cracking with the weight of her confession. He had access to the raw, hidden data. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that if another company acquired Biovance, before the flaws were public, the stock would triple overnight. So he used his insider information. He leaked the news of the potential breakthrough without mentioning the dangerous side effects to a rival corporation. They initiated a hostile takeover, and Julian, having bought millions in Biovance stock beforehand, made a fortune. Over $200 million in a single week. That's insider trading. A huge case, but Agent Miller prompted. But it wasn't just insider trading. Isabel screamed, the sound raw and agonizing. The new company, eager to recoup their investment, rushed the drug to market. They buried the flawed data. They pushed it through a compromised approval process. The drug was called Veridia. Anya's blood ran cold. Veridia. The name was a lightning bolt, a searing brand on her memory. It was prescribed as an advanced fertility treatment. Isabel whispered, her eyes locked on Anya's. For couples who had tried everything else, it was hailed as a miracle drug. Anya's hand, the one not pressed against her stomach, flew to her mouth. No, it couldn't be. The room began to spin. The minimalist grey walls seemed to close in on her. She and Julian had struggled to conceive. For 2 years they had been through a heart-breaking cycle of hope and disappointment. Doctors had found no specific issue, just unexplained infertility. Then a year ago, a new specialist, a top doctor recommended by Julian himself, had suggested a new cutting-edge treatment. A miracle drug from Europe, he had called it. Its name was Veridia. Anya stared at Julian, at the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying, the man who had looked on with what she thought was shared joy when the pregnancy test finally came back positive. But it hadn't been joy. It had been the culmination of a monstrous plan. The side effects, Anya could barely form the words. Her throat was tight with terror. What were the side effects? Julian finally broke. A guttural, animalistic sob tore from his chest. Anya, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We have money. The best doctors. Isabel gave the final brutal answer, her voice devoid of all emotion, a flat line of horror. It worked. The drug allowed women to conceive. That part was true. But the hidden data from the original trials showed that in nearly 80% of cases, the fetus would develop a rare and fatal neurological disorder. Most didn't survive the 3rd trimester. Those who were born didn't live past their 1st year. The world went silent. The agents, the handcuffs, the penthouse, it all dissolved into an indistinct blur. The only thing that was real was the life kicking inside her. A life she had craved, a life she had celebrated, a life that had been conceived through a monstrous lie, a poison given to her by the man she loved. This was the dark secret. The divorce wasn't about protecting his money. It was about severing all ties before his child was born with the fatal condition he himself had knowingly unleashed upon the world. He wasn't trying to disown a wife. He was trying to outrun a death sentence. He was trying to erase the ultimate evidence of his crime, his own dying child. Anya looked at her husband, the father of her child, the architect of her destruction. He was no longer a man. He was a void a black hole of greed and ambition that had consumed everything, including the life of his own unborn baby. The strength drained from her legs. The room tilted violently, the glittering view of Central Park spinning into a nauseating vortex. As her knees buckled and the world faded to black, the last thing she heard was the distant hollow sound of her own scream. Anya awoke to a world bleached of all color. The first sensation was not sight, but smell. A sharp, aggressive scent of antiseptic that scoured her nostrils and bore no resemblance to the curated peony and old money fragrance of her former life. The second was sound, the soft, insistent, and terrifyingly rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to her left. For a fleeting, merciful moment, she was adrift in a sea of disorientation, the horrors of the previous evening feeling like the suffocating remnants of a fever dream. Had it been real? The cold words, the crimson dress, the click of handcuffs. Then, with the force of a physical impact, the memories crashed back in. Viridia. The name detonated in her mind a single word that contained a universe of betrayal. It was the name of the drug. The poison, the monstrous lie she had welcomed into her body. A raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat, and her hand, trembling uncontrollably, flew to her stomach. The gentle, reassuring swell was still there, a fragile vessel in a venomous sea. Was her baby the one pure thing she had left already a ghost? Easy now, Mrs. Croft. Take a deep breath. A calm, steady voice pierced through the fog of her panic. A woman in navy blue scrubs her face, a welcome portrait of professional kindness, was adjusting the IV drip in Anya's arm. You fainted. We brought you straight to Lenox Hill Hospital. We've been monitoring you and the baby. The baby, Anya's voice was a ragged whisper, a thread of sound in the cavernous silence of her fear. She couldn't bring herself to ask the real question, the one that clawed at the inside of her skull. Is it dying? The nurse's eyes softened with understanding. The baby is fine, she said, her words deliberate and clear. A little stressed when you were brought in, but the heartbeat is strong and steady now. Your own heart rate is elevated, which is understandable. You've had a severe shock. The baby is strong. 4 simple words. They were not a cure, not a promise, but they were a lifeline. In the raging flood of her shattered reality, Anya clung to them as if they were the last solid ground on earth. Her baby was a fighter. It was already more than its father had ever been. I need to see a doctor, Anya managed, pushing herself up slightly. The effort made the room spin. A specialist, not just an OB, a geneticist, someone who understands. I need to know everything. Her voice broke on the last word. She needed to know the shape of the monster she was facing. We've already paged the head of our maternal fetal medicine department, Dr. Elena Ramirez. The nurse reassured her, fluffing a thin pillow behind her head. She's the best. She'll be here to speak with you shortly. For now, just try to breathe. Rest was an impossible luxury. Her mind was a torture chamber, replaying Julian's face, twisting in panic, the cold finality of the FBI agent's voice, and Isabel's horrified confession over and over. The entire architecture of her life, a magnificent structure she had once admired, had been revealed as a criminal enterprise, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. And the final, most intimate, most unspeakable betrayal was swimming in her very womb, conceived from a miracle that was in truth a time bomb. As the nurse left to give her a moment, another figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. It was Isabel. She had shed the blood-red dress, the armor of Julian's mistress, and now wore a simple, anonymous pair of jeans and a grey sweater. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the faint purple smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The emerald fire in her irises had been banked, leaving a weary, sorrowful glow. Anya's body tensed. A primal part of her wanted to scream at this woman, the beautiful harbinger of her apocalypse. But the anger felt distant, a secondary emotion, muted by the all-consuming terror of Julian's ultimate sin. Isabel wasn't the enemy. She was just another piece of scorched debris in the blast radius of Julian Croft. "What do you want?" Anya asked, her voice raspy, devoid of accusation, but heavy with exhaustion. I came to see if you were all right," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper. She hovered by the door, a respectful distance away, as if acknowledging she was trespassing on sacred ground of grief. "And to tell you, I told them everything." Anya remained silent, watching her. "The agents at the penthouse," Isabel clarified, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. "After they took you, I stayed for hours. I told them about Viridia, about the Bio-Vance data, about Julian's back door into Gentech. I gave them the offshore account numbers he'd bragged about, the server locations he thought were hidden. Everything I knew. My brother is working with them too. He's turning over every record from his firm. He's terrified, but he wants to make it right." Why Anya's question was genuine, a flicker of curiosity in the darkness. Why not just disappear? He would have given you money to run. Isabel finally met her gaze, and Anya saw the profound depth of her self-loathing. Because he was going to let my brother, my family, take the fall for a crime he masterminded. That was the first crack in the fantasy. But the moment I found out about Viridia, the real truth of it, I looked at him, Julian, the man I thought I loved, and I saw a void. It wasn't just greed, Anya. What kind of person knowingly condemns unborn children for profit? It was a level of evil I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes flickered to Anya's stomach. When he told me he was divorcing you, I knew why. He was running from the evidence, from his own child. And I knew you were pregnant, but I didn't know about the drug. Not until my brother's lawyer uncovered the connection. The thought of you, going through the rest of your pregnancy celebrating only to face that. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't let you be the last one to know the truth. It was the only thing I could do to claw back a single shred of my own soul. In that moment, Anya saw past the affair, past the label of mistress. She saw another woman who had been utterly conned, another life consumed by Julian's insatiable ego. They were bound by a strange, twisted sisterhood forged in the fires of his spectacular destruction. They've frozen everything. Isabel added her voice, flat and emotionless. Every asset. The penthouse is a federal crime scene. The accounts are locked. The cars, the art, the watches, it's all gone. Evidence in the largest fraud case in a decade. His lawyers are saying the evidence is insurmountable. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. Good, a cold, hard part of Anya thought. Let him rot. But the satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting warmth in an Arctic landscape of pain. Julian's imprisonment couldn't reverse time, couldn't purify the poison. The door opened again, and a woman with intelligent, compassionate eyes and an air of calm authority entered the room. "Mrs. Croft, I'm Dr. Ramirez." With a final lingering look of profound regret, Isabel quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Anya to face her new reality. The next hour was a clinical, terrifying blur of medical terminology, consent forms, and agonizing questions. Dr. Ramirez was a miracle of empathy and professionalism. She explained the process for an advanced diagnostic amniocentesis, carefully and patiently outlining the procedure, the risks, and the stark reality of the potential results. She didn't offer false hope, only facts. And for that, Anya was grateful. "I have to know," Dr. Anya pleaded, her composure finally crumbling under the clinical weight of it all. "Whatever it is, I have to know what I'm facing." "We will get you answers, Dr." Ramirez promised, her hand briefly resting on Anya's arm. The simple human touch was grounding. "As quickly and as safely as we possibly can." The days that followed were a unique form of purgatory. Anya remained in the hospital, a voluntary prisoner in a sterile white room, while the world outside feasted on the carcass of her old life. The news of Julian's arrest had gone supernova. "Wall Street Wunderkind or Ponzi King," screamed the cable news chyrons. His smug, handsome face was plastered everywhere, the poster boy for catastrophic hubris. The stories detailed the SPAC's fraud in lurid detail, but the darkest secret, the corporate evil of Viridia, remained a tightly sealed component of the federal case, a horror not yet fit for public consumption. Anya refused all visitors, save for her parents, who flew in immediately, their faces etched with a pain that mirrored her own. She hired a team of lawyers, not to fight for a share of Julian's blood money, but to meticulously expunge him from her life. To dissolve the marriage, to legally and financially firewall her child from the toxic Croft name and its indelible legacy of shame. She existed in a state of suspended animation, the week-long wait for the test results stretching into an eternity. She didn't sleep, she merely drifted in and out of consciousness. In her waking hours, she would stare out the window at the city, a city that now seemed alien to her. Every pregnant woman she saw, every baby in a stroller was a stab to the heart. She was suspended between a life that was over and a future that was too terrifying to contemplate. Finally, the day came. Dr. Ramirez entered her room alone, closing the door softly behind her. She held a file, and her expression was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. Anya's heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. She gripped her own hands over her belly, a protective gesture that felt painfully inadequate. Dr. Ramirez sat in the chair beside the bed, opened the file but didn't look at it. She looked directly at Anya. "We have the results from the full genomic sequencing panel," she said, her voice even. Anya held her breath, bracing for the impact, for the words that would shatter the final fragments of her world. Dr. Ramirez took a slow, deliberate breath. "Anya, your baby is perfectly healthy." The words didn't register. They were a language she had forgotten how to speak. Anya just stared at her, her mind a blank slate of incomprehension. "What, no? That's not possible. Viridia, the neurological degradation." "I know," the doctor said gently, her professional calm finally breaking into a warm, reassuring smile. "We read the federal case files your lawyers managed to get unsealed for us. We knew the exact rare genetic markers we were looking for, and they are not there. We ran the test twice to be certain. He is completely, unequivocally unaffected." He. Her mind snagged on the word. He. You're having a son. Anya Dr. Ramirez confirmed, her eyes shining. A healthy baby boy. The dam broke. A sound, a wail that was equal parts grief and joy, tore from deep inside her. It was the sound of a week of terror, of months of unknowing, of a lifetime of betrayal, being washed away by a single miraculous wave of relief. The tears came, then hot and cleansing, pouring down her face as she finally truly let go. But how she sobbed, her body shaking. Isabel said, 80%. 80% is not 100%, the doctor said, softly, her voice thick with emotion. It means 20%, 1 in 5 were spared. It's a game of Russian roulette, played with the most precious stakes imaginable. It's a monstrous, unforgivable gamble. But Anya, you and your son, you won. She won. It wasn't a victory over Julian. It was a victory over fate, over poison, over the darkness that had tried to claim her future. Anya checked out of the hospital the next morning. The world looked different, the colors more vibrant, the air cleaner. The Julian Croft penthouse on Park Avenue was sealed a monument to a dead life. She walked away from it without a backward glance. With a small, life-saving loan from her parents, she found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a world away from the silent, sterile grandeur she had known. From her window, she saw not a curated park, but a living one. She could hear the joyful shrieks of children playing, the friendly bark of dogs, the distant, reassuring rumble of the F train. It was the chaotic, beautiful symphony of real life. She spent the final peaceful months of her pregnancy rebuilding. She bought a second-hand crib and painted the nursery a cheerful, sunny yellow. She reconnected with her old circle of wonderfully messy, artistic friends who enveloped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, never once mentioning her notorious past. They brought her soup, helped her assemble furniture, and made her laugh, truly laugh for the first time in years. 3 months later, Leo Alexander was born, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces. He was loud, demanding, and utterly perfect. He had her eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him for the first time, skin to skin, feeling his tiny, fragile fingers instinctively curl around hers, Anya felt a love so vast and powerful it rearranged her entire universe. This was real wealth. This was a legacy. One rainy afternoon as a 2-week-old, Leo slept soundly on her chest. A news alert popped up on her phone. Julian Croft sentenced. She read that faced with an avalanche of evidence, and Isabel's unshakable testimony, he had accepted a plea bargain to avoid having the full horrific details of the Viridia scandal made public in a trial. He was sentenced to 150 years in a federal supermax facility with no possibility of parole. Anya looked down at her sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She felt no hatred for Julian, no desire for revenge. She felt nothing at all. He was a ghost, the antagonist of a story that was already over. Her story and Leo's was just beginning. Her life was no longer defined by the man she had lost, but by the son she had almost lost and had miraculously gained. She was not the millionaire's disgraced wife. She was Leo's mother, and in the quiet, sun-drenched world of her small Brooklyn apartment, she was the richest woman in the world. Anya's story is a harrowing journey from a gilded cage to true freedom. It's a reminder that wealth can be a mask for unimaginable darkness, and that true strength isn't found in penthouses or designer clothes, but in the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. She lost a life of luxury, but gained a life of purpose, proving that even after the most devastating betrayals, we have the power to rise from the ashes and build a new world for ourselves and for our children. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a wicked man, but the rise of an unbreakable woman.